So the next step for the Cobra is to get it ready for the dyno and do a couple more things. Swapping the wheels is something I really wanted to do because the drag radials, which are on the back of this car, are not as good on the dyno. Sometimes it chews up the tires, sometimes it doesn't read the horsepower right with drag radials, the rubber's too soft. So I wanted to take the wheels off the car, and I thought this would be a good time when I had the car up on jack stands to get under and do the big 3 wire upgrade kit. So this will go to the alternator, the new aftermarket alternator that's on its way in the mail. And I had actually canceled the order I had because the other one wasn't going to be made for several months. The parts for it were on back order. So I bought this big 0 gauge inline fuse, and you can see this big black ground wire here. Plenty of ground wire to run it where I want to. And this is the big power wire that I was talking about, 0 gauge as well. So if you add 0 gauge power, you need ground in the same gauge. So this is the Mechman alternator I bought. It's a 170 amp, and it's going to be plenty for my car. And I took Danny Johnson's advice, and I went ahead and ordered this with the external voltage regulator. So you'll see how we get that up. So here's a really cool shot of the back, made in the USA. This is the Mechman Alternator. It's what Danny Johnson has, and he has a great video on how to install this and the Big 3 upgrade, which I followed. So here is the alternator in the box, just a nice little shot of it there, and the external regulator. And this is going to be interesting to wire up. As usual, I was a little bit overwhelmed by all the wiring and had to learn everything. There's the relay that I'm going to have to wire up and everything. And the best place I found for it that I wanted to put this regulator was to go right here by the headlight. Now the reason why the external regulator is such a good idea is because these alternators get really hot down there by the exhaust, and it actually burns up the regulators inside them. So this external regulator is going to help. A little side note I wanted to add about these alternators is if you order them with the external regulator, they do have to be modified, and so it is not likely that you can add one of these to an existing alternator. According to what Mechman says, they have to have some internal things done to them to handle this type of modification. So I just wanted to make that clear. It's something I learned. Everything I learn in this build I try to share with everyone in case that's something that they're interested in, or if they have a question, because that is a question, could I just add this to mine or not? And you can see the new green Gates belt that I bought for the car, and I actually had to take that one off. It was still too short, and get another one. So here's the alternator going back on. You still put the factory power wire on it here, and for now I just wanted to make sure that the nut was on there and that the factory wire was there until I was ready for the 0 gauge power upgrade wire. So as far as the belt goes, I got the right size according to the website, but you can see the tensioner was still too far to the right, and the 76-inch is the one that I should have for my pulley setup. I even got the 76.5 just to make sure that I have it in case I need it. So here's how it sits now. Still a little bit past the tensioner marks, but this is the belt that Billet Flow recommends with this pulley combination. And now a little side note about the belt, something I learned about that was Billet Flow showed that I needed a 75.5-inch belt, and it actually turned out to be a 76-inch, and they say 75.5-inch, but they had the part number next to it, and that part number was actually for a 76, and I think it might be because they had the inner circumference of the belt measured at 75.5, and the outer circumference is 76. So you have to be really careful on what you're ordering. And the belt will probably stretch a little bit when it gets used and heated, so that's something else to consider. And so this is the size belt that I wanted to go with, but I do have a couple different ones in case that's not going to work. Now I did take the lid off of my power fuse box that's in the engine bay, and I did modify this fuse box lid to make room for the wire that was going to go to the old fuel pump fuse, but that was not a good idea. So here's the box that's modified. It did not work out. There was still constant power to it, so I did have to change that. So we'll get to that a little bit later. But here is the power wire that goes from the alternator This plugs into the actual alternator, and this diagram was actually very easy to read, and this is the other diagram that shows how to wire the relay. So you have the fuse that has constant power, then you have the signal wire that goes to the key on, only when the key is on, then you have the power wire that goes to the actual regulator. So I decided to mount it here, and those are the different parts you're going to use of the relay. The wires are all coming out of it, and the pins on the relay match up according to the diagram, and then you'll have the constant power there. So it's not really a how-to video, but this is basically how it's supposed to be. And I did put heat shrink on the end of each of these and crimped it down. You can see it's kind of a mess here, and I want to thank Danny Johnson for lending me all of his electrical tools. He helped me finish the job. Then it just came down to wiring them and running them where they go in these screws, and adding a ground as well. That wasn't really in the instructions, but I did see some other videos on how to do this. Now this is how I had the add a circuit into the fuse box, and it looked really nice, but like I said, there was power that was going to it, so I had to get rid of that setup and go under the dash. So these are the connections for the big three. Danny Johnson had these at his house, and he was kind enough to let me buy them and get the ones I needed from him to make this work. So it's hard to see, but you basically go in here and you use the studs from the previous ground, and you ground the new wire to it with that 90-degree angle. And so the studs were a little bit larger than the opening on those connections, and so I did have to modify them. So I wore my safety goggles. I'm going to insert my buddy here again for the safety goggles. I have used these a lot lately, and I just want to say these have helped out a lot. There have been a lot of times in this project that I've had stuff go all over my face, and I want everybody to remember to be safe and wear safety goggles. I don't like doing it. It's so much easier to just go without them and not have to go through the trouble of putting them on and everything. But you don't have a second chance if you lose one of your eyes. So everyone, please be safe with your eyes, and I'm trying harder. I'm not perfect at it, but I am trying to be better about this.
So get some of these. I paid $1 for these.
And I went ahead and I just opened up the holes a little bit with a drill, and the instructions tell you you don't want the hole to be too big because it can cause bad connection issues and maybe even fire. So you want to get the stud to fit just perfectly in the hole for the new cable, and that just goes for any electrical connection. You don't want a huge ring that's way bigger than the stud or bolt that's going over. So I went ahead and did that until it fit. And something cool I did was I actually kept the hardware from all the engine swap that I've been doing lately with the other GT. And there was one of these studs, which is like what's on the front of the motor mount, that is right here. And I just took the bolt that's on the right here out, and I added one of the studded ones that would have a nut on it, so I could use that for the new ground. So it's basically just the same setup the front of the motor mount has, but now towards the rear. So I could plumb it all up, and here is the big ground that goes all the way down there to that other stud on the back of the motor mount. Here's the power wire with the heat shrink on it. This will go to the alternator. Now, something that wasn't very clear or in the instructions was this gray cable here, and it has the adjuster to turn the voltage up and down. And so if you look here, there's a knob and it goes left and right, and I thought this was a great place to mount this, and it's out of the way, it's not going to get touched, and it has a nut there on the bottom to hold it and secure it down. Now the only problem with this was it didn't say which way was full and which way was off, and so I think I watched a video on YouTube and somebody had said all the way left was 12 volts and all the way right was 20 volts. And when I plugged it in, I had it just turned to the right slightly. I backed it all the way to the left and then went to the right just slightly so that it would be around the 14 mark. But when I started the car, it was instantly at 17 volts. And I shut the car off and I looked it over and I tried to double check everything. But the truth was it's backwards from that. So all the way right is 12 volts, and then as you turn it to the left, it increases the voltage. So I called Danny Johnson, talked to him about it a little bit. Then I was able to go ahead and adjust it. I tried going all the way to the right, and that was right at 12 volts or non-charging when I started it, and I turned it to the left, and that did start to bring the voltage up, so I got it exactly at the 14 volt mark where I want it. And so I have the cigarette lighter plug-in to check voltage, but I also used another SCT programmer I have to run the voltage to be sure, so here's that video. And so the next thing I did was I went to the hardware store and got some new hardware for these half-inch nuts so that it could secure those down. Those connections I bought actually came with these little wing nut style ones, which are okay, but they're actually wide and they kind of rub on the wires when you try to take them on and off. But I wanted something really nice and new and clean, and so I went and got these nice nuts to put there on each side. They're both the same size, everything fit nicely, so that's what I ended up doing. Now I'm trying to have fun during all this. I'm trying not to get overwhelmed and do this all and crank on it. I'm trying to go on walks with my family and do things, and we went on a walk and I came across this 3-valve Mustang GT. Now this Mustang, you can see there's a tarp over the front of it, and I know this car. I actually raced this car in my Blue Mach 1 and I beat it, and just shortly after that the car was wrecked, and I saw it listed in Las Vegas for sale, and they must have bought it back from the auction company or whatever and got it back, and so now it's sitting in the side yard of the owner's house. And so my family and I were just going for a nice walk, and I came across the car and I knew the car, so I thought that was really interesting. And I did drive the orange Cobra around a little bit, and I wanted to drive it around and get some nice pictures of it before I take the wheels off, because like I said, I'm going to be swapping the wheels onto my red Cobra because these will be better for the dyno, and the tires are a little bit in better shape in case I do drive it back from the dyno, so I wanted to do that. So here's the Cobra, nice drive, and here is me putting the 10th anniversary wheels on the competition orange Terminator. And they don't look bad on this car at all, but I don't like the wheels on this car. It's just temporary. Obviously, I'm never going to get rid of these 10th anniversary wheels. They go to my red Cobra, but I'll probably just keep them aside because I love the 5-spoke chrome Terminator wheels, and that's what I want to have on both cars. And I'm in the process of getting a nice set, another set for the red Cobra. I have 2 already, so boy does this torch red look good with the chrome wheels. All Terminators look good with the chrome wheels, and so that's how I want the car to be eventually. So the next thing I had to do though before I dropped it on the ground was address the power issue. As I showed earlier, I was under the impression that I could add a circuit to the fuel pump fuse because I figured that the fuel pump fuse would not have constant power to it, that it would be a key on fuse, just like the pumps wouldn't be running all the time. But it turns out that, as far as I know, every fuse in the junction box under the hood of the car has constant power to it, and that's because the battery cable goes right to that box, and so you do have to go under the dash. And so looking through the manual and looking at the different options I had, this fuse number 30 under the dash is for DRL, or the daytime running lights. Now that would be an option if you had the car in Canada or another country where it's required by law to have daytime running lights, and there is a fuse there and it is key on power. So what I did was I took a test light and I touched the fuses under there until they lit up or didn't light up, and that one did not light up until I cycled the key, so I knew that was a key on power switch. And so I had to take the add circuit out from under the front of the car in the front fuse panel under the hood and rewire it and just extend the wires under the dash to that fuse. So I really like that setup because that fuse is not being used for anything, and I also did pay attention to what the battery volts were with the car sitting off when it did have the fuel pump fuse plugged in with the ATA circuit, and it was drawing 0.1 volts off of the battery. And so I thought that was kind of interesting. I don't know if it really would have killed the battery, but over time it might have. So I didn't like that. So I charged the battery completely, and I changed the location of the ATA circuit to this daytime running light area, and the car sits perfectly at 12.2 volts, and it's not pulling any power, and it's not draining the battery at all. So that to me is the best idea of where to run that ATA circuit fuse. And so the next thing I wanted to do was drop the car on the ground, drive it around, make sure that the alternator stayed at 14 volts. I did a really quick pull with the car just to make sure that the voltage didn't change, and I'll show you all that footage right now. So now I'm working with my tuner to schedule a dyno tune appointment and get the car tuned, and it will be on 91 octane, so I'm not looking for huge numbers. Staying with the stock lower pulley and a 3.0 upper, should be in the 20 pounds of boost range, so that's going to be a lot of power. And I just want to make that clear. My decision on all this was not to have E85 in the car. I didn't want E85 in my gas tank or in my fuel lines. It attracts moisture. It's not good for the system. It burns the pumps out easier. There's a lot of downfalls to E85. Now, I don't even have E85 in the area, so that's another reason why I wanted to do that. And I'm not talking bad on it for those who do it, because I know people make even 100 horsepower more or so with the E85. So it's not like it's a terrible thing. I just personally didn't want that in my car. I wanted to be able to drive it anywhere around here and be able to fill up the car without having to look for a specific gas station or have a specific fuel in it. So I'll be doing little things to the car until then, you know, zip tying wires, making sure everything's good. Before I drove the car, I made sure all the wires underneath where the alternator weren't touching any exhaust or alternator or any of the hot components down there. So I did some of that, but I'll just be cleaning it up a little bit more and working on the engine bay a little bit more until that dyno tune appointment comes. So stay tuned for that. I'm really excited for that. I can't wait. The car looks great with the chrome wheels on it, and everything is how I want it on the car. So I'm just really excited, and I hope all can go well with the dyno tune. So stay tuned for that. And if you want to watch the videos on this car, I put all the videos into a playlist, and I put those in the end of every one of the videos of this car, so you can catch the whole build. So thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more of these videos, and hopefully we'll have a dyno tune appointment soon.